Hey group, let's do our last lesson of chapter 7, quadrilaterals. So a quadrilateral, think quad. It is a polygon with 4 sides. So we just talked about triangles. Those have 3 sides, tri, 3, quad is 4. So a key idea, when we add up the angles within a quadrilateral, it now equals 360 degrees. So when I add up W, X, Y, and Z here in this figure, I want to set that equal to 360. So something I want to show you is this diagram we have here of quadrilaterals. This is something you're going to want in front of you whenever we're talking about quadrilaterals, something you can always refer back to whenever you're trying to identify and classify quadrilaterals. But this diagram shows the properties of different types of quadrilaterals and how they are related. Now, the most important thing I'm going to tell you is that when you identify a quadrilateral, you have to use the name that is most specific. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. But use the name that is most specific. Let's take a look at this graph, this diagram. So a quadrilateral, that's any 4-sided figure. But we get even more specific. We have a quadrilateral that's called a trapezoid. Take a look at that shape. You've probably seen it before. A trapezoid has one pair of parallel sides. So it has one set. Those sides and these arrows are showing that they are parallel. So one pair of parallel sides. Another type of a quadrilateral is a parallelogram. That is a quadrilateral where the opposite sides, they're not only parallel, as you can see, but they're also congruent. And that's what these tick marks mean. That top is congruent to the bottom, and the left side is congruent to the right side. So opposite sides are parallel and congruent. And another type of quadrilateral is a kite. Now there are 2 pairs of congruent adjacent sides. So when I see these tick marks, that means these sides are congruent. Remember, they're also adjacent to each other. They're next to one another. So a kite has congruent adjacent sides. Okay? And something important to know is that their opposite sides, when you look across, they are not congruent. Okay? Only the sides that they're next to are congruent or meet at the same point. Now, let's head back to the middle here where we saw parallelogram. Parallelogram, we can be even more specific. So a quadrilateral can be a parallelogram, but then it can also be a rectangle. So a rectangle is a parallelogram, right? The opposite sides are parallel and congruent, but now you have to look. Are there 4 right angles? If there are, we're going to identify this as a rectangle. Another type of parallelogram is a rhombus. A rhombus is a parallelogram, but now there are 4 congruent sides. If all 4 sides are congruent, we call that a rhombus. And the last one here is a square. So a square is a quadrilateral that has 4 sides. Okay, a square is also considered a rectangle. Okay, now careful, a rectangle cannot be a square. But a square is a parallelogram, right? The opposite sides are parallel and congruent. It's also a rectangle because it has 4 right angles, but it's also a rhombus because it has 4 congruent sides. So the most specific way to identify a parallelogram is as a square, and that's a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides and 4 right angles. So this diagram right here is very important. This is how we identify and classify our types of quadrilaterals. So you're not just going to say, oh, that shape's a quadrilateral. I want you to identify what type of quadrilateral. Is it a trapezoid? Is it a square? Is it a kite? A rectangle? Okay, is it a parallelogram, or can I be more specific? Is it a rhombus? So you're being as specific as you can be. Okay? So this is just our overview, our notes